to the Ultimate Freight Podcast. This is Joe Gianosa here with Ultimate Logistics Inc. Here to guide you through these choppy freight waters. Last week we talked a little bit about the freight market and what's going on right now with produce season. I said we had a little bit of a pullback with rates over the last couple of weeks and to expect a slight surge as we progress here through May. And we're definitely seeing that. Earlier this year we saw rejection volumes of 50% across the refrigerated truck market nationwide. Then we saw it slightly pull back a couple of percentage points every week until we got down to about 40% last week at the end of 2 weeks ago. The end of last week and this week, beginning of this week, we're starting to see it go up again by a few percentage points. So it was at 40%, now it's back up to 42%, and you can expect to see that climb as we go throughout the produce season and perhaps the rest of the year. The other thing I wanted to talk about is the pipeline. The Colonial Pipeline was hacked into, there was ransomware and things like that. They have dealt with the situation, and the third-party company came in to help with that cyber attack, and the pipeline is back up and running. I don't believe it's at 100% capacity yet, but it is up and running. People wondered how that would affect gas prices and diesel fuel. Gas prices, regular retail gas, was definitely affected because people said, oh no, there's going to be a shortage in gas, let's go get gas, and it created the shortage. Kind of like how you all freaked out about toilet paper when COVID hit first, and people were losing their minds when it came to toilet paper. And that's what created the toilet paper shortage, was everyone went out and bought all the toilet paper because they thought it was going to run out. So it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, that kind of happened this last week down in the southeast, especially around Atlanta and places like that, where they really count on this Colonial Pipeline for all of their gas and resources. And a lot of retail people, a lot of regular patrons, they came in and bought up all the gas. There was people filling up grocery bags with gasoline. I would highly advise against that. People are doing them in containers. Everyone was freaking out that everyone was going to run out of gas, so everyone went to the gas station to pump as much gas as possible, and here we are with higher prices and not a lot of gas to go around in the southeast, but it's getting better. So luckily the gas prices for diesel fuel wasn't affected as much because these truck drivers weren't hogging all the gas like it was the TP shortage of 2020. Let's get into BOLs. BOL stands for Bill of Lading. The BOL says it all. That is the legal document, but the BOL is the supreme document of the shipment, and you have to make sure that it's accurate. You can get into a lot of trouble as a shipper and lose a ton of money if this document isn't accurate when you're actually shipping products. The reason why is because the process is you'll have a driver come in, and the driver should look at that BOL and say, okay, here's how many cases it has, here's the shipper that it's coming out of, and here's the receiver that it's going to, here's all the product lines and codes and everything else, here's how many cases it is, and sometimes it'll have the pallet count on there, but the case and weight is definitely on there. It's the driver's responsibility to make sure that the case count matches up with that BOL. That's been a lot harder recently because of COVID. A lot of drivers aren't allowed on the docks, so it's really hard for them to be able to count those cases bit by bit, but it is getting a little bit easier. But they basically look at the rows and the levels and count that way and make sure the case count's good to go. So you always want to have the case count on your BOLs if you're a shipper, and make sure you send that to your broker before you ship the load. say, hey, here's the BOLs, here's everything. The broker should send that BOL to the drivers, and the driver should have it on hand. Most of the time they get it at the shipper though, and the driver can say, hey, here's everything that I'm picking up, and that driver will sign the BOL saying that he or she picked up the freight and that the case count matches. So the receiver will count up all the cases and make sure everything's good. If there's any kind of discrepancy or anything like that, then they will tell the driver, hey, we marked off 2 cases short, and they'll literally write on the BOL 2 cases short, and then they'll sign it. At that point, it's up to the driver and the broker and the customer to figure out a solution from there. But if the driver signed for those cases and then at the shipper and then brought them into the receiver and they were short, technically they are responsible for those cases. Sometimes the driver can talk to the receiver and say, hey, can you count that case count again? I counted different, and they can go from there. It's kind of a gray area, and it really depends on your relationship with your drivers and brokers and things like that. But if you're shipping a product and you're a couple of cases short, it's very possible that the shipper's system said that they shipped out all those cases, but they actually didn't, or they didn't make it on the pallet or something like that. Sometimes when it gets brought into the receiving facility, depending on if it's like refrigerated freight especially, some stuff goes in a cooler, sometimes it goes into a freezer, and so cases are moved around. And it depends on the receiving facility, but sometimes they need to make room in a cooler or a freezer, and they'll just keep those cases outside, outside the doors, move some stuff around, then bring it in. Sometimes cases can get lost. So make sure you avoid any kind of hassles or problems by making sure your BOL is correct. If there's any kind of changes that happen, whether it's where it's going, like the receiver, or the case count changed or weight or something like that, make sure it's on your BOL. That way there's no problems at the receiver. Sometimes I've seen customers change up their order. They change it up, everyone's in the know, except the BOL doesn't get changed. Then when they come in to actually deliver the product doesn't get received at the receiver because the BOL doesn't show that. It's not legal to do. So the receiver will just look at it and say, hey, we'll take what's on your BOL, but nothing else matches up. And a lot of times they'll reject that other freight that was added on correctly but wasn't added to the BOL. And that creates a whole other problem. Now you have a driver with extra product, and you got to figure out, okay, can they make up a dummy BOL while they're there between the customer and the receiver? Can they do something really quick? Or are they just not going to take them? It depends on the receiver. Meanwhile, the driver's just waiting around, and you're incurring extra costs, whether they have to wait around to figure out the BOL situation, or because you're paying detention, or they have to take that product back to the shipper, and that's when it gets really expensive. So just make sure your BOL is correct. If you're adding on any product or subtracting any product, if anything changes to the order, make sure your BOL is correct and fine-tuned. That way there's no problems at the receiver, and you're not going to incur any extra costs. So thanks for tuning in today, and we will see you next week. See ya.